This car is the most honest car you ever see.
It's been a dream ever since I've had it.
The first time I heard that engine screaming, I thought, I gotta have one of those.
For me, the cars have personality.
What's great about a BMW Classic is the community that surrounds it.
When you listen to that, that's why we're here.
Welcome to Classic Heart, the BMW Group Classic podcast. My name, as usual, is JP, and we're looking back now on 14 absolutely marvelous, interesting episodes, at least from my point of view. And before we jump into this conversation with a very interesting guest, another very interesting guest, I would like to share some thoughts with you. I really enjoyed all the recordings so far. Wonderful guests, good conversations, and always a good laugh and good fun. And I think that's what it's all about. But what makes me really proud and happy, and I can speak for the whole team, is that we created a little place where we can speak about cars, about the things we like, and we have no limitation in terms of guests, because we have guests that have a massive collection of cars. We have others that have one classic car. We have others that don't collect at all. They just share the passion for cars. But all together, I think it's a great picture of what drives us in this classic car and the car collecting scene and the passion about cars. So our guest today makes no difference in that and aligns perfectly in the 14 conversations before. We are so happy that we have Beaumont with us, who has started his career as editor and writer for legendary Evo magazine, which is like the holy grail of the print world and the car magazine world, and then evolved until now, and he is a publisher of his own BMW-focused magazine, Werke. I think that's something that we need to learn more about. And with no further ado, welcome, Will. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. Yeah, very good. Very relaxed. And yeah, it's nice to be in your company.
We are very happy you joined us here. And thank you very much for taking this time. Let us start to speak a bit of yourself. Give us a little idea who you are, what you do. I just give the outline. Your name is Will Beaumont. And Will, is it fair to say that you are a kind of a hired gun in writing about cars?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Hired writer, hired driver. If it's anything to do with cars, basically I'll say yes to it, and especially if you're paying me, even more so. I was a staff writer at Evo magazine here in the UK, then went and started writing for other titles, some online things like Speed Hunters. I worked for Autocar and stuff in the UK as well, a little bit. A fantastic magazine that no longer exists, unfortunately. I used to write for Modern Classics a lot, but that sadly didn't last through COVID. I love telling stories about cars, and I have somehow managed to turn this into a career.
I mean, this is, for those who do not know Evo in the UK, I mean, Evo is one of the print legends in the car scene. So how did you start? How did you get that job?
Evo was the magazine that I subscribed to when I was, before I could drive, because it was a magazine that really focused on, it was a car magazine, obviously, and cars are obviously important, but the main focus of the magazine was always driving. It seemed to be the case that the writers and the group of people that made the magazine, they just cared about driving, and that just to me was what cars were. So I was working as a graphic designer, design agency after I left university. I'd always been interested in magazines. Magazines were sort of always a fascination to me, and I wanted to work in magazine design ideally. And a job at Evo as a designer came up, so I applied for it, and I went to the interview, and I'd spent, I think, about 3 times longer than I was meant to be there, because we just sat down and started chatting about cars, and I had the most fun with the guys that were there, and I got the job, which was great. And I worked as a designer on the magazine for a couple of years.
Yes, I mean, those are the great strokes of luck in life. To have the chance to combine your passion with a job, with a career, I think that's something very unique. I mean, I went to Classic Driver with not coming from university or nothing. I just had this idea of doing something in my life with cars. And so Classic Driver came around. And that's already, for me, 23 years ago. So Classic Driver celebrates its 25th anniversary. And I'm so long with that company. And I always say I will never get rich and famous with what I'm doing, but I love every single day on the job. And it gives so many opportunities. For example, being a podcast host like this. I mean, this is absolutely priceless. Another chance to have conversations with people I would never have met in my life otherwise. So I think we can call ourselves very, very lucky. And I take the freedom to compare this with you as well. But I would like to understand, from a designer to a writer, how did you use your chances at Evo?
Yeah, whenever we needed an extra driver to go out on a photo shoot, whether we needed someone just to be there to clean wheels, whatever it was, I would always be there. I'd always volunteer to get out there and to get involved in these shoots and drive the cars and do what I needed to, which gave me a really good basis of what lots of modern performance cars were like. And then at the time, the magazine needed a new staff writer, and I'd written a few little bits for the magazine here and there. So I moved from one desk to the other, quite physically, just in the same office. I moved from one desk to the other, and I started writing about cars, and it's been that way since, and it's been huge amounts of fun. I mean, I know I should say that sometimes it's a difficult job, and there are the odd occasions where it feels a little bit like work, but most of the time it does feel a little bit like I'm just having lots of fun, which is, I feel, is not. It's possibly not fair, but I'm going to make the most of it while I can.
Yeah. Look, to be honest, and I think everyone who's tuned in, you just imagine a young Will sneaking from the designs desk or design office, part of the Evo editorial offices, sneaking around with one ear, always listening. If someone, do we have someone drive this car? Who can we take to production? Me, it's me. I'm there. So I assume you're more seen on the floor, walking up and down the halls than sitting at the designs desk to not miss out a single job.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think the possibility of me being sneaky is possibly laughable from lots of my colleagues, because I don't think I was anywhere near as subtle about that. I think I was probably walking down to the other end of the office going, can I go out on a shoot? Can I go and do this? Can I drive this car? Can I be here? Can I go and do this? And they only probably let me just to shut me up rather than whether it was wise or not. They went, oh God, give him a car, let him go on a shoot because he'll stop pestering us.
Fantastic. How important is all the mechanical part of cars for you? You come from a creative side as a graphic designer, sorry, to be precise. But how important are mechanical facts and development engineering? How important is that to you?
Oh, for me, it's core to how I'm able to do this job. Because like you say, yes, I'm from a more creative side, a more visual side, but actually that was, I suppose that was just by chance in some respects. My love of cars comes from being around them, and my family are all interested in cars, and particularly, so my mum's an engineer as well. My dad has always been into the mechanics of stuff, and he fixes his own cars and is part of it. And I absorbed some of that feel as well. So I've always been interested in the mechanical side of things and taking things apart and rebuilding things and being sort of physically interested.
Yeah.
My mechanical skills are fairly limited, but I suppose that basis, that gives me a knowledge to understand some more of the more complex things. And that also, then when it comes to driving them, I have a better idea about what those mechanical things are, what I'm feeling from those mechanical things, and what changes that rather.
I think that's a very interesting approach, especially as you said that also this comes from your mother's side with the engineering factor. So from that side, then yourself, you are creative in terms of being, as I said, a graphic designer. So I think also the look plays an important part. But when I hear what you said, it's fair to say it's not all about the looks, it's about the combination of both. And I think that's what the magic of the majority of the cars we like represent, in a sense.
Oh, yeah. I mean, obviously, yeah.
It is, right?
Yeah. And the way cars look and the style that they have. I mean, they, as a graphic designer, obviously, style and taste and all those things are always sort of kind of forefront of my mind a little bit as well. And if I like the way a car drives, I like the way it looks even more. And I can change my mind on the way a car looks. Is that if I've driven it and it's felt spectacular and I've loved sort of how it performs and I've loved being in it and driving it. And if I didn't like the way it looked particularly before, I get out of it and re-look at it and it becomes much cooler. It's got under my skin and I can really fully appreciate it.
You know, for me, it's like this. The thing you describe absolutely on the point is when I like driving a car and the way it behaves, the way it acts on the road, then what I say to myself is, okay, I don't bloody care how it looks to the outside because I'm sitting inside. I'm looking out.
Yeah.
So I see the hood, I see a bit of the side through the mirrors, and that's it, right? So this is I made my peace with cars. I really dislike the design and really doesn't speak to me. But let's be honest. Worst car design the last 10 years. Name one. And disclaimer, so everyone listening in, don't feel offended. Don't write us letters. It's just a personal opinion, so relax, everyone. So go ahead, Will. Worst car design last 10 years.
Yeah, you go first.
I mean, that's not fair, but let's do it. The worst car design that I could, if I think about worst car design, is SsangYong Chiron. I hope I pronounced it right. Do you know this Korean
Yeah, I know
SUV?
what you mean.
I think it looks like an SUV raped by a minivan with a Mercedes heart. Nothing fits on that car. The front looks like a pushed up C-Class, right? A little bit. And the back, the back is hideous.
Yeah.
But that's, as I said, my opinion, but I think nothing is right with that car.
I keep thinking of lots of kind of the small SUV type things that I find always to look sort of like really heavy and clunky. And I think the one that I can think of at the moment is the Ford Puma, the modern Puma. It's not trying to change anything or do anything new. All it's trying to do is appeal to sort of the current trend, which is these sort of small SUVs, just trying to make a lot of money rather than do anything good or interesting. It's just trying to tick some boxes to sort of take a part of a market share, and that's boring. Who cares about that?
Yes.
I'm not interested in cars for that. I want in cars that are fascinating and interesting, exciting, and it's none of those things.
Yeah. So now we know what you don't like, but what are the cars you like? So, for example, what's in your garage? What are you considering for yourself as being interesting and perfect when it comes to a car model?
I've got a very ordinary car. I've got a BMW X5, a first generation X5. I suppose the only element about it that is...
You love that car, man.
I do. I absolutely love it. And
Because you went to Nürburgring with that.
I did, yes. So, yeah, I've owned it just over about a year and a half. And I bought it because I needed something a bit bigger, or I wanted something a bit bigger. I didn't need it at all. It was just purely because I wanted it. And I found out that you could get a manual version of a first generation X5, which, again, I don't have loads of money to buy lots of silly cars, but that seemed just silly enough that a manual version of an X5, and it was within my budget. And oh god, it's so much more fun and so much better than I could ever expected it to have been, and it's completely wormed its way into my life, and I've had so many fantastic experiences in it now as well that it just feels like a real part of my car family, my family, and I have so much fun.
And do you only drive the car from A to B? So is it your daily driver, or do you also do like road trips with the X5?
In February earlier this year, I went down to Austria in it, and we went skiing, and it was great to sort of turn up to the ski resorts in a almost 20-year-old X5 kind of thing, where everyone else has got gleaming new SUVs and all these new fancy things, and just driving around. And it was fantastic on the snow. It was brilliant fun. We found some snowy roads to take it down, and on some big expanses, some big snowy car parks to do some big donuts in, because I shouldn't, because I act like a child in it, I'll be honest. I mean, I can't put me behind the wheel of a car and I can't help but act a little bit like a child. And then I went to the N24, the Nürburgring, the 24-hour race at the Nürburgring as well, and I drove down there in my X5, and that was a fantastic car to have during the race, because you can just get everyone in it. You can park it on the side of the road and go and explore into the forest to go and see the race at night and all that sort of stuff. That was just it was perfect for that. And then I stayed around for a couple of days afterwards and did a few laps in it as well. Admittedly, it wasn't as perfectly suited to doing laps of the Nürburgring as it was for the rest of the time, but it held its own. I think I overtook maybe one person in a small Suzuki Swift or something. That was probably as close as I got. But again, it's a great car. It feels so well engineered, and whatever I do the work on it myself as well. You're taking it apart, and it goes apart easily. It goes together properly. It's a terrific car, and I think that it will probably go down in history with some people. The X5 will, as people that sort of it introduced the world to kind of road-based SUVs or road-based kind of 4x4 cars. I love it.
And there, I have to say, at that time, the X5 looked absolutely fantastic. With this, with the very high end, like the back looks very like not chunky at all, but like it looks just delicious. I would say in a sense, I really liked it. I don't know why, because it's everyone's criticizing the back of the X5, but I love it.
I think it's fantastic, and I think the way in which it adapted core BMW design values and transferred them to a car that BMW had never done before, and then introduced certain other design elements to it as well. When you look down the side, that it's much more sort of sculpted, where the arches sort of blend in and out of the body side, but then it still has very kind of the very rigid, sort of strong horizontal line sort of below the window. And I'm sure that there's technical terms for all of these things that I don't know. Earlier this year, I did an event with Frank Stephenson, who was the designer of the X5.
Yes.
And we spoke about the first generation X5, some of the stories that from around there, and him designing it in a matter of, well, I think a plane journey, basically, was how long he had to design it. And he's a fantastic bloke, and he tells fantastic stories. And he's also very, very opinionated about certain things. He doesn't take a kind of corporate line. He's absolutely, if he doesn't like something, he tells you. He was not a fan of, he's not a massive fan, it turns out, of some of the Chris Bangle designs. We had a 1M coupe that was there, and he pointed out some of the design elements, like the kind of the way the sill sort of bulges downwards and outwards. He was like, I don't like this at all. This looks like it's sort of someone really fat sat in it, and it's bent it. And I was like, that's one of my favourite cars, that one is. I love those. I can't believe you just said that. But again, he can say these things with authority, and he has the opinions and the things to back them up.
And he can be a very tough cookie. So for those who don't know him, imagine a former BMW senior designer commenting on the BMW X5, and the first thing he does is holding a giant plastic gun to his head, pulling the trigger, and the screen lurks with blood. I love the reviews on the Mini. He is great fun and perhaps one of the most influential car designers of our times, full stop, period. I think no further comments needed. Nevertheless, we need to speak about your very own magazine you are the publisher of. It's called Werke, and the magazine is only focused on the brand BMW. And of course, after flipping through the first issue, my question is, why did you dedicate a magazine to the BMW brand?
So I have an affinity with BMW, we should say. It's a brand that I feel very comfortable in. I feel very comfortable in the cars, and I've always liked them. Not all of them, obviously. It's, as a journalist, there's occasional ones that have appeared that I've not been a fan of, and I'll be honest with that. But most of the time I get them. I get the cars. I think they work for me. So that's why BMWs, but also because there wasn't the magazine world. There's a few magazines out there that I love the idea of, and I love the execution of, and that mostly in the Porsche world. There's 000, for instance, which is this great quarterly magazine, high quality, fantastic photography, brilliant writers, and it was really lovely magazine. And I just thought, well, if this works in the Porsche world, why wouldn't it work in the BMW world? Why wouldn't something similar be appropriate here? I like this magazine, but I'd want to read about this, but about BMWs. And there isn't anything that exists. There are BMW magazines, and it's certainly in the UK there are a couple, and they do a great job of what they do. But there was, I suppose, there's a different community to be served by maybe a magazine that focuses on the culture around the cars a little bit more, focuses on the history of the brand and the history of different models, and can tell the stories in a more sort of detailed manner, rather than individual cars as such as these magazines and the club magazine that I work on as well, that they focus on the people that own the cars and the modifications that might have been made to them. But I think there's a bigger stories to be told where we can dedicate more space and speak to original engineers if we can do, and talk to racing drivers who drove the cars in period, and talk to the people that are looking after the cars now, and talk to people that that are living the brand. Those are the people that I wanted to sort of tell the stories of, because I think there was nothing like it, and I think there was a readership for it. But you can't expect someone to sit down and read a 2,000 or 3,000 word story from their phone screen or even from a laptop screen.
No.
It's a task that's not a very appealing one, but put someone in front of a magazine and have some pages to turn and some fantastic photos to go with it, and the breaks that naturally happen when you're turning pages as well. It's easy to do, and it's easy to introduce someone into that world, and that's what I love about car magazines, and that's why I wanted to create one, so that I can give more people that opportunity to enjoy stories.
Yes. I mean, when we did what we did online with Classic Driver, it was always, are you guys trying to kill the print magazines? Not at all. Everyone at Classic Driver had the same feeling as you have. They wanted to work in a car magazine, right? And now we decided to make this content online available 24/7 everywhere in the world for free in a high quality. But nevertheless, reading a magazine like Werke, like the beautiful work also Guy Berryman, who was also a guest here in this podcast with us. I mean, the celebration of the Porsche 917 in one of the editions of Road Red is, for me, gold. Pure gold.
Yeah.
And I want to extend this also to Werke. What you see definitely with Werke, and I don't try to be here the one advocate for this, but two things I really like at Werke is the following. First of all, you have a graphic designer who is the publisher, and you have a writer who is the publisher. So two important things for a magazine in terms of style and content are unified together with the team, of course. But it helps that you understand every side of the magazine. And the love for this goes so far. By the way, who would like to have a look while you're listening to the podcast, just go to werke.site. So Werke is the wonderful German word, and written WERKE.site. You find every information you need. But Will, would you do us the favor and read from the centerpiece of the first edition of Werke? You have wrote something about the M3. Would you read the first paragraphs, the two paragraphs for us? And then everyone else can decide if they want to go further.
Absolutely. So we've reviewed the new G80 M3 in the magazine as well. So there's lots of M3 content, but I'll read the first opening paragraphs to the review of the G80 M3.
Please go ahead.
A small left, followed by a sharp right over a hump. If I was bonkers enough to be a rally co-driver, I'd call it out as left 5 into right 3 over crest. No matter who I was, I'd be bracing myself for the landing after the ridge. I know this section of road well, and even if the tyres don't leave the ground, most cars sink inelegantly into the dip following the crest, especially the big, heavy ones, much like the 1,730 kilogram G80 M3. Left, right, stomach in mouth, brace, pray for the bump stops, and nothing. No impact with the floor, no need to look in the mirror to see if sparks have been generated, and have also not been skyrocketed upwards as the suspension releases all that stored up energy and bounces the car upwards either. None of that. The M3 just dealt with one of the most challenging sections of my grueling test route. It smoothed it out, stayed in check, totally unfazed.
So this is what Werke sounds like if you read it out. And thank you, Will, for sharing this with us. I mean, writing about cars is a difficult thing if you do it right. And this just sound right, what you just listened to. And we have to make one point very clear. Creating a magazine, running a magazine, fill it with content, design it, take care of the distribution of great photography, all these kind of things take a lot of work and, let's face it, a lot of money. So, Will, allow me one question. If you would have an unlimited budget, how would the perfect Werke issue look like?
Obviously, the answer I should say is that it wouldn't look any different. It's perfect as it is. But obviously, that's not true. That isn't true.
But Will, it is an honest podcast. We try to be as honest as possible.
Okay, absolutely. Well, no, I'll be. So, on a serious point, to an extent, with that, is that there are elements about it that wouldn't change. This is because I'm very lucky to be in a position that I am. I have some very extremely talented friends who work in this industry, whether they are writers like Henry Catchpole and Stephen Dobie, who have both contributed to big parts of the first issue, to photographers like Dean Smith and Jordan Butters, who both are very, very talented with their cameras. And although they don't work for free, they are able to give me a bit more leeway than perhaps people that I didn't know. So I've been able to fill the magazine with exceptionally good quality photography and writing, and I've been able to have it printed at high quality on quality paper. So all of those things are elements that, to an extent, probably wouldn't change. Maybe it would be a bigger, thicker magazine. So the E30 M3 feature, like I say, we drove it in North Wales, and I drove it in North Wales partly because it's an area that looks spectacular. It's an area of roads that I know really well. It means I can take a car there and I can get used to it exceptionally quickly because I know the roads so well and I can understand the car very, very well. But actually, to take that car to Corsica, where that car, the E30 won a WRC round. It has a connection to the Tour de Corse Rally, a connection to Corsica. It would be amazing if I'd taken that car to that place and to been able to sort of to drive that car on those roads and give it that sort of like that connotation. So that would be one thing I'd have done if I'd had more budget.
You spoke so enthusiastically about creating a magazine and fulfilling the dream of writing stories as you like them personally, and you think you should give the right platform to some of the most interesting cars, interesting people around the cars. If there is someone who is who is in his mid-30s or beginning 30s, someone else, first of all, would you give the advice, if you're passionate about a special car, a special niche of cars, go and do your magazine. Would you advise that to do or not?
Yes, absolutely. If you can make it work and it makes sense to make a magazine, you're in any position to be able to do that, I would absolutely, recommend it. If I was being sensible, however, and I was to sort of say to someone who, if we were talking financially, and if I wanted to give somebody some life advice in how to kind of have a secure future or any of those sort of things, I'd say absolutely not.
Speaking about sleepless nights. So what is the most fun part of being a publisher of a magazine for the brand you like?
Specifically working on a BMW car magazine is that I love driving. That's what I love about cars. That's what I love more than anything is I love driving them. And I want to spend all of my time driving them. And when I can't drive them, I want to write about driving them. And when I can't do that, I want to read about what it's like other people like driving them. And BMW's a part of, again, the ultimate driving machine was its slogan for so many years because it had driving at its absolute core, and I feel that when I'm in BMWs and part of them, and I suppose that's where I have this affinity comes from.
Yeah. So it all started with a question: how does your garage look like? What's in it? So we know that's the X5. We learned about the 2002. Which you dedicated a whole Instagram channel to. So is there something else?
Yes, I have a Renault Sport Clio 200 Cup as well. So a non-BMW is in my garage. So I have 3 cars, and that's
a very cool one. Terrific. I love them.
Me too. I think it's fantastic. I was very lucky when I was at Evo magazine we did a big hot hatch test where we had, I think maybe it was possibly close to 15 different hot hatches right from the sort of early generations, right from a Mark 1 Golf GTI up to sort of the current cars of the time. And I drove in a very intense period of time, drove all these hot hatches. I've enjoyed some of them, but I never got in them and go, oh, I really want one of these, except this Clio. And I got in it and I drove it and I just thought it was magical. I thought, this is everything about this. And what color is that? The alien color you mentioned, the alien green? No, I didn't get an alien green. I'd love to have had an alien green one. And that specific car actually sold not too long after I bought one, which was a bit of a pain because Renault sold it off from their heritage fleet. But I've got a white one. But it was about those other bits, about the making sure it was a cup and making sure it had the Recaro seats, because they were the bits that you really, really feel, and that was more important to me. So yeah.
So let's speak about the 2002 a bit more. When I visited
Yes.
first the Instagram channel, when I came across seeing that, tell us more, because it looks to me a bit like a Raster mod, but I think I'm doing not justice.
No, absolutely. It's very much like a resto mod.
Okay, good.
It's a car that I've owned since about 2009.
Two?
I think I bought it maybe a little bit. Yeah, not quite. If I only owned it, yeah, that would have been fantastic. No, but 2009, I think I owned it. So I was quite young when I had it.
Yeah.
I was, I think, my late teens. I think I might have been 19 or 20 when I first bought it, and it was the car that got me into BMWs. My granddad had BMWs before, and my dad had a BMW, but they were never sort of like very kind of core parts of my life. But what I wanted something that was old. I wanted something that was rear wheel drive, and I wanted something I put twin carburetors on, so I had that kind of typical 4-cylinder induction noise. That was all I wanted, really.
Yeah.
And there were lots of Alfa Romeos that were too rusty. The fast Fords that were in this country, they were too expensive. And I stumbled across actually, it was a 1602 originally, but I stumbled across this car, and it has just become such a significant part of, again, my identity, really, this car, because I drove it. I've taken it apart so many times. I can't tell you how many times I've taken it apart. It's almost very few of the parts on it as well are actually the original parts of the car that I bought. It's been reshelled. It's had different engines. It's done all sorts of things in the process of me tweaking and modifying it and turning it into, I suppose, what I think is my version of an ultimate 2002, again, within the budget that I've got, which is not massive, but I mean, I spent a little bit too much money on it, really, more than was ever sensible. But again, that's what we do with cars that we love. So I had this car, and I drove it every day, and it was the most fun. I learned, again, when I say I learned to drive sort of front engine rear wheel drive cars, it was this car that taught me how to drive. It was this car that taught me what handling a car at sort of a relatively, fast sort of pace is. And I used to go on lots of trips with it, so I used to use it every day, as well as going up into Scotland, went down to Italy, into Germany, I've done laps of the Nürburgring in my 2002 as well. Then when I got my job at Evo, my commute was a bit longer, and it was a little bit more difficult to do the commute in my 2002. So I bought an E36, a 323i Touring. It meant that I had the opportunity to take my 2002 off the road and to really sort of indulge in this project about turning it into, again, what I thought would be the ultimate 2002. So I took it off the road, I stripped it back to bare metal, and had it repainted in a different colour, repainted in Riviera blue, rather than, it was originally, I think it was Granada red, which it was not a bad colour, but I preferred this kind of dusty, dark Riviera blue that was the original BMW colour, and then just did basically everything to it. So it's got a roll cage, it has bucket seats, the engine is bored out to sort of the maximum that we can get. So I think it's about 2.1. It's got hotter cams in it, it's got big carbs on it. Typically, again, it had to have twin carbs because it had to have that noise. It has sort of original Group 4 Bilstein dampers on it. It's got big vented brakes from a turbo. A 5-speed gearbox from an E21 3 Series. It has a limited slip diff. It has a bespoke aluminium fuel tank in the back, which turns out, again, because my maths is bad, it turns out that it's tiny. I didn't calculate that very well, and it has this tiny little fuel tank in it. But it's cool, and I love it. Yeah.
So everything has been done with that car, right? I mean,
Yes.
That's really is it fair to say this car is so you?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that feels, to me, it's actually something that I write about in the first issue of Verka as well, because we have a sort of a long-termers section, so we keep up to date with certain cars. So I introduced my car in there, and I feel like for a long time that this car and me are associated so closely together that people recognise me from this car. It's kind of one of the things that I'm most proud of, creating this perfect car. And it's not a resto mod in the sense that it has many modern attributes. It's still got the original steering. It's still got the original engine, although modified heavily. And it's still got all the original sort of like parts, even if they're modified and tweaked. It's not modernized. It is fairly original in many respects. And I suppose that's what, because I said old car, and I wanted to feel old when I get in it, and I wanted to feel like an old car, but at the same time I wanted to feel like my car, and the modifications that I do and then break and then do and remanufacture it to and re-engineer it so that it wouldn't break and just keep I basically had an intense period of a couple of years of just me developing it. So then going, oh, right, well, I need to make that stronger. I need to make that better. Or it is so me. It's so part of me. And I suppose other people will drive it and maybe wouldn't understand it. It's perhaps a bit too extreme for some people. I think I've kind of created something that's a bit special with this engine, and it's got a really fast road cam in it that's just a bit on the extreme side, but when you start revving it really sort of kicks in and you get that hard note when it sort of really gets on cam, and it's just exactly what I want. It's just perfect.
I think tuning this, let's call it tuning on modifications in period, I really like this approach, because that's as you like to feel like an old man in that one, like an old person. I would rather say you would like to feel it like a period. Like, how was it owning a car when it came out? What have people done to it and stuff like that?
Yes, absolutely. And I think there are parts of it which are about my car and how I've modified it, which aren't exactly as they would be, and they wouldn't be available in period. So the roll cage is a lot more intricate and a lot safer than it ever would have been in the 70s, and the seats in it are a kind of a more 80s or 90s design Recaro rather than anything older, and it's also on electronic ignition. So
okay, good.
Yeah, there are elements about it that there are a little bit more modern, and perhaps it meant that if it was, you couldn't drop it into a traditional period photo and it looked right, it wouldn't quite be right.
Yeah. Let's talk about driving in the UK and about the special car scene in the United Kingdom. I think you and all my British friends, so all the car scene here, you live in a country where you have the most incredible roads with so much changing scenery that I think, just come here, even though you drive on the strange side of the road, that's okay, that's acceptable. But it's absolutely fun to drive here, and you see so many new things, surprising things. And what I really like in Britain is actually when you go to nice places with nice roads, you definitely meet like-minded people. Yeah. And they absolutely open for a conversation. And again, that's something I love in the car scene, in the car world, is that you have one topic to talk about, and you do talk about it.
Yeah, I think England, the whole of the UK, England, Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland there's lots and lots of very passionate car people. Cars are such an integral part of lots of people's history and lots of people's lives. I used to go, whenever I used to take my 202 to Scotland, we used to go to a little island called the Isle of Arran. Yeah. And it's not very, there's a ferry once a day backwards and forwards to Arran. I think it might be twice a day. And you go there, and I would get there at the start of the week, and so many people would want to come up to me and sort of say, oh, I used to have one of those. Oh, I remember when those were around. Oh, that's fantastic to see. When I had a friend who had one of those sort of cars, and they were so enthusiastic about seeing the car, an old car on the island and someone enjoying it. By the end of the week, once I'd done laps around the island, making lots of noise, ruining people's peace with my twin carb sounds and all those sort of things, people weren't quite so happy to talk to me. They would avoid me and give me sort of fairly nasty looks. But then again, there would always be someone else. There would always be more people there. Another interesting car would turn up, and everywhere you go, whether to all corners of the country, because people sort of try and find all these amazing roads, that you always bump into someone who's got a really cool car. I end up bumping into people that are also there on photo shoots. Generally, whenever I go to these places that I like to do photo shoots on, they'll bump into someone who I know who's working there because they're in the industry, because we're all doing the same thing, whether it's because we want the location because the roads are good and they look spectacular for the photos, or that we're going there because they're great to drive. We're all doing the same things.
And it all gets more organized also in a sense, because we see a big scene, especially also in the UK, coming up with great new car meetings that have not been there before. What would you say, who is the spearhead of that movement?
The big headline one is Caffeine and Machine here. Again, it's kind of in the Midlands. It's not too far from me. And these places turn up, and they're car shows every single day that you could just turn up, and you will always see something fascinating or interesting. And you can always, if you want a place to meet up with your mates before you go on a road trip, they're there, and you just turn up. And Cafe in a Machine exists. There's the Motorist up north as well. There seems to be more and more popping up all over the place.
Yeah.
And it's great that there's so many, because it gives me opportunities to go to these places on the way to do some spectacular roads and to enjoy, as well as my own car, looking at other people's cars and the enthusiasm that they have.
I mean, that's also the beauty of it, that you just can go and you leave whenever you want to, and you don't have a FOMO of missing out something, right? So because you go there, you get entertained by talking to people, looking at cars, having fun, and this kind of freedom when to come and where to go and what to do. That's something that we've seen in the last couple of years, and I think is going to be a significant part of the scene where it's just easy going. We had the guys from Hofmeisters, same like you, BMW aficionados, fans, but also all other brands, so multi-brands. And they started as a WhatsApp group and now became kind of a club. So a different club. I think they don't have anything like a accountant or something like this. So they don't call themselves a club. And, you showed that also the club scene is changing and had to change due to COVID, because you can't see each other. It's not possible to meet. So come up with new ideas and new formats. And so I think it's a wonderful addition to the existing scene. So I think that goes into the right direction. But more importantly, I would like to have your idea of someone who's in their 20s. And we have this German word creation, young-timer, derived from the word old-timer as loving more cars from the 80s, late 70s. It's actually a nice word. It doesn't work so well in English, but let's say new classic would be one of the phrases we always use on an international scale. What would be your advice to say, look out for a car and to start owning something vintage or older, not new, in terms of cars, obviously?
Oh, it's a good question. Yeah, I mean, the simple answer, and this is the not very interesting answer, I suppose, is buy the one you could afford. I ended up with my car was because it was the one that I could afford, and I learned to love it afterwards, and because it was great. And I suppose it would be an E33 series, because that's the sort of age. And if those people, if someone was thinking about buying that, and they're quite expensive now, a lot of them, but I think if you could get one of those, they're a wonderful car, similarly perfect car to a 2002 in the sense that they're a great size and they're a great thing to own because they're quite simple mechanically as well. And I would thoroughly recommend that it is a part of your ownership, is to sort of spend some time really getting to know it mechanically so that you can be confident in it when driving it. And I've owned 3 E36 BMWs
really
over the years. Yeah, I had a 323i, and then I had 2 318 IS saloons, and I loved them all. I particularly liked the 318S, which is why I ended up with 2. And I love that 4-cylinder. I love that 4-cylinder engine. It felt like a really punchy little motor, and it was a great sort of really well balanced car. And that, I suppose, that engine's also available in the compact as well. So a 318 Ti, I think that'd be a great car to have as a sort of a young person, sort of learning, getting into the sort of like the car world and getting into a kind of a young timer. It's maybe not sort of considered a true classical modern classic just yet, maybe. I think possibly, but it will do very soon because they look exceptional, and also they're kind of quirky, those little compacts, and I think they'll have a big in the future. I think there'll be a big of all the kind of the range. Of course, the M3s and perhaps the bigger 6-cylinder engine cars will be the biggest, most interesting ones, the one with the most value. But I think the compacts, because they're kind of quirky, they will always have this kind of cult following, and it's always nice to have that kind of, to be a little bit. I like being a bit the outsider occasionally. I like being kind of the weird one, the one that didn't go down the conventional path with everything.
You know, if something is new as an idea and brings something special, like compacts, I mean, that's it was a new class in a sense. That's lasting, and I agree absolutely. I think we're going to see, first of all, we're going to see, if not already happening, super conversions and super additions and modifications.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a big, big thing. That could be a new movement, which I would definitely keep my eye on in the development of the pre-owned vintage scene. Let's call it like that.
Yeah. Although I didn't want to make my car feel more modern.
Yeah.
There was obviously some people that are doing very, very exceptional things with older cars and making them faster, grippier, more reliable, all those sort of things that which you're turning them into these incredible, basically supercars, really, you know, in terms of the cost as well of them.
Yeah.
But they're supercars, and that will be where when car manufacturers aren't able to tap into and appeal to sort of the old school core enthusiasts because they're restricted out of it. Although it seems like they're always finding new ways in which to bend the rules, which is great. I love seeing that. But there will be all these retro modding companies will create them, but as cars get older, the cars that are most likely to be resto modded, as it were, will become wider. And again, I can well see, in years to come, E36 compacts that have been resto modded to have maybe even like turbocharged M3 engines in, or a straight six engine from a F80 or a G80, because people love the idea of a compact and they love the small dimensions and the quirky nature of how it looks, and that sort of little short boot lid is just, they look cool. I just think they look great, but perhaps they want some modern performance. I'd love to see someone pouring loads and loads of money and loads of technology into an E36 compact. So I think it's just great for, again, going back to sort of like the niche within niches of these car manufacturers, and they create something that's just wild and silly and bonkers, because cars should be all these cars should be a bit of fun, and there's nothing more fun, it seems, than being able to drive a supercar on some dirt. I mean, that would be how silly and how fun is that?
Mega. No, absolutely. And I mean, the silly the better, and if there's 10 super silly ideas you can't realize, there might be one which will be realized and get also like a big corporation like an OEM going to this path and doing, as you mentioned, the Porsche Dakar is a very good example, which was inspired by, I think, by a collector from the Middle East who had his own project before Singer and others. And so that's good to see that there's also an awareness, and that also the brands listen to the core people, like the hardcore people, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
I think that's also a new element in the whole new car development.
Yeah.
We had Franciscus van Meel here in the podcast, and one of our questions was, how influential are M users and owners to you? And he referred to Jan, who we also had in the podcast, a big M collector from Istanbul. I mean, that's so important. And I think that's a completely new way from consumer getting what the producer presents to them, by getting an engagement from the consumer as well in the creation of new stuff. Yeah,
absolutely. And I mean, I suppose if BMW are looking at this and they're seeing people making Safari versions out of 3 Series, that perhaps, although they'll jump on this bandwagon as well, and we'll end up with an M3 or an M4 or maybe an M3 touring Dakar. I mean, what a terrific car that would be.
Yeah, fantastic. And with this outlook of what might be the next trends in the world we love, in the car world, we unfortunately have to come to an end. So, Will, thank you very, very much for sharing all your views. We cannot wait to see more and more issues of Werke. We wish you all the best of luck with us, and thank you very much for taking the time being our guest at Classic Heart today.
No, thank you so much for having me on. It's been an absolute pleasure, and it's a great podcast to be a part of, and it's been a huge amount of fun. So thank you so much.
And as always, also a big thank you to everyone who has joined us today for this episode. And on our own account, we would like to ask everyone who is following us on that lovely journey through the podcast world, we need your support. If you like what you hear, please hit the subscribe button to not miss one of our future episodes. And it would be a tremendous help if you give us a 5-star rating if you think we deserve it. And of course, please leave comments and suggestions. We're super open and would like to get in touch with you. And with the Christmas holidays at the doorstep, we also take a little break before we have our new episode live. That means we are back in 3 weeks. So we wish you all a great Christmas time. Enjoy the holidays and have a good start into the year 2023. Always yours, JP.